Hare Krishna, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha, Patitanam Pavnebhyo, Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. So I'd like to welcome all the participants for our Viplavah 2021 International Educational Symposium conducted by the Ministry of Education under the GBC body of ISKCON. So today we'll be conducting our fifth session, and it's going to be a session filled with a lot of exchanges focused on development of consciousness. We'll have four speakers. At the beginning of this symposium, fifth session, I'd like to invoke the blessings of Srila Prabhupada and the Lordship Shri Panchatattva and Shri Radha Madhav here in Sridham Mayapur. And together, I would like to invoke the auspiciousness by chanting the pranam mantra to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. To begin the symposium formally, we'll first like to hear from His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So I shall play a audio and video file which will allow us to appreciate Srila Prabhupada's views on education. I would just like to check whether my screen is visible, if Abhay Charan Prabhu can confirm.
Yes, Prabhu, it's visible.
Thank you. Is it audible as well?
Please increase the volume. It's not very audible.
Is it audible now?
Yes, mostly.
Okay, let me then go back a little bit and start again so that we can hear from the beginning.
How we can learn all these things? Mahasriva, go, the Guru, Sarvi, Tadvidhi, Pranipatena, Puriprasnena, Srivaya. You cannot challenge like a nonsense. You have to engage yourself. That is the beginning. Brahmachari is indicated, go to Guru, and you may be a king's son or a very learned king's son, it doesn't matter. You serve your Guru just like a menial servant. This is the first education. Go to Gurukul and serve the Mahat Guru, the broad-minded Guru, just like a menial servant. What is that? I go, collect everything for Guru, and do not claim proprietors. It is Guru's problem. Whatever you collect, that is not your problem. That is Guru's problem. And go to Gurukul, and when Guru will ask you, my dear boy, please come and take your prasadam, then he will take. If Guru forgets to call you, you should come. Not that I am hungry, there is food stuff at me. No, without permission of Guru, you cannot touch anything. How and strenuous training was there. Being in Guru, sent by Guru night, Guru's instruction. This is very culture from China. And leave at place of Guru just like an Indian servant. Where is that in India?
Hare Krishna. So life is meant to develop Krishna Prema, to develop our consciousness from wherever we start, all the way to development of full love for Krishna. Yesterday, we discussed many topics with respect to established Shastric education, expanding Shastric education, and teachers, what the teachers must do. But in the effort, the teachers and students must not forget that through this whole process, what we're trying to achieve is the development of our own consciousness and those that we're trying to help. For this purpose, I'd like to invite our first speaker today, His Grace Srila Prabhupada, who has been serving ISKCON for 30 plus years, 3 decades. He's founded, inspired many intelligent students in India and across the world to take up to Krishna consciousness. And currently oversees also many development projects within ISKCON India. And currently, he also serves as a professor at the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. And Prabhu is going to speak to us on levels of consciousness. Srila Prabhu, thank you for joining us and giving us your time. So I hand over the symposium to you, Prabhu. Every speaker will request you to speak for about 20 minutes, 18 minutes, if possible, followed by leaving some 5 to 7 minutes for question answers so that devotees can address their questions. So the symposium, I hand over to you now.
Thank you, Tapan Mishra Prabhu, for giving me this opportunity to share some idea about how we can address the issue of consciousness to revamp or reform our education system. Let us start. Vancha kalpataruvesya kripa sindhuvevacha patitanang pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharani Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Paschat Desakarne. So I will share my screen. Yeah. Okay, so levels of consciousness. I am going to shed some light on this. So Srila Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness movement is for training men to be independently thoughtful and competent in all types of departments of knowledge and action. Another quote of Srila Prabhupada, at a time when material science predominates all subjects, including the tenets of religion, it would be enlivening to see the principles of eternal religion of man from the viewpoint of a modern scientist. Even Dr. S. Radhakrishnan admitted at a World Religion Conference that religion will not be accepted in modern civilization if it is not accepted from a scientific point of view. And as all of you know, one of the very first books that Prabhupada wrote and dedicated that to even to scientists, that is Easy Journey to Other Planets. And if you have read that book, you will see it starts with a quote from Times of India, where the physicists who have been awarded Nobel Prize in that year, I think 1959, so they talk about antimatter. And Srila Prabhupada emphasizes, yes, if there is a matter, and then there has to be antimatter. But then he's saying, Prabhupada said that the way they are probably, because the conclusion there is that when this antimatter and matter, they come in contact with each other, then there is an explosion, there is a destruction. So whereas Prabhupada said the matter is temporary, matter can be destroyed. So how can you define something antimatter and still say that that is destructible? No, antimatter has to be permanent, eternal. It has to be opposite of that matter. And the book goes on, a very beautiful book, is Journey to Other Planets. So what is the common subject matter that we talk about and scientists talk about? Srila Prabhupada, in many places, he gives accolades to scientists, saying that they could figure out that there are subtle things, right? Otherwise, who could have ever imagined that we would be talking in terms of atoms, subatomic particles, or cell, in a cellular structure, the varieties that are make up a cell. So these are all not possible, but scientists have done a great job. So Prabhupada says that our quest for the subtlest form of cause is common in both the Vedantic worldview and modern scientific view. So we must agree to an ontological form and causal structure at some point of time. So if you look at the fundamental questions that we are interested, so also the scientists, they are interested. What are the fundamental building blocks of nature? And this has been raised even at least 2,500 years back by ancient Greeks. But if you look at our literature, they only talk about what are the fundamental building blocks of the nature. Particularly, if we look at Bhagavad Gita 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, these answers, the answers to this, what are the fundamental building blocks of the nature, is there 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, and 7.7. And there are, of course, there are unlimited ways how we get that answer. Now, when we started studying, right, that's what we were told, the periodic elements, they are the beginning of the universe, right? So out of, there will be, in my time when I studied, there were 108 or so, and now it has gone beyond 120. So the question is that, are these fundamental truths underlying our experiential universe? And we were taught, yes, hydrogen, helium, these are all fundamental truths. And, there is a very big professor, David Tang, and once giving a lecture, he told that emphatically, he says that we were telling white lies to our kids. That means we were basically cheating. So that's what he admitted. And then, from periodic table, there are a lot of experiments. People realize there are atoms, and then within the atom, there is a nucleus, there are electrons, one after another particle came out. And finally, we saw that there are the basic building block is the one atom and two quarks. right? So two quarks actually it started with the idea of proton and neutron, and then that went to the two quarks. And then the physicists were convinced this is all, right? This is all. That is one electron. So electron is the fundamental truth, and two quarks are fundamental truth, and that's it. So again, the further research made them to realize this is not correct. And so then they realized that, as of now, currently, I don't know how many of you are able to follow what I'm saying. Currently, the basic fundamental block of the universe, that means what we are looking at. We are looking at what is that original substance. From that substance, everything comes, right? This is what we are asking. Scientists are also trying to understand the same thing. And so the answer as of now is the quantum field. And without going into deeper into the science of this or physics of this, this is the current view of the nature according to science. This is called standard model, and the standard model has 17 fields. Okay, and all of you know that recently Higgs particle got a lot of attention. People talked about God particle, and they got also Nobel Prize. So this is magnetism, strong force, weak force, matter, Higgs boson, and so forth. But I'm not going to talk about all those things in detail. What I'm interested is that what is happening according to the modern science. According to modern science, consciousness is an emerging phenomenon. Within modern science, the origin is the inert energy, which is according to them, the standard field, quantum field. And such particles make up complex molecules that in turn makes up living organism. And ultimately, so consciousness is an emerging phenomena of this syntactic process. So what is this emerging phenomena? That means if you are aware of brain-mind study, so mind is an epiphenomenon of brain in action. So for scientists, brain in action, that's all. That's all they could figure out to explain our bodily symptoms, bodily behavior, everything about the body. So this is, but what must be the basic building block of this universe? It is there in Vedanta. So by simple common sense, we can say a basic building block, or that original substance from where everything comes, that must be eternal, that which has no origin, right? That's basically we are seeking. And that which can exist independently. This must have all the properties that are seen in the universe, and it must have properties that are not visible within this manifest universe. So if you look at this, this is the very verse that Janmadi Yasyata Anyadi Taratasarthesu Avigya Surat. Or we can also talk about Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Movidadhati Kama. So these are the verses that talks about what is the original building block. So basically, in Vedanta, we talk about absolute consciousness is the original substance. It existed, it always exists, and from it everything comes. So absolute, although one without a second, becomes many for his sweet pastimes. This is his inconceivable feature. It is completely wrong to assume that there is no activity at the level of pure consciousness. Just like at a very distant vision, a mountain looks just as green top, but a closer and deep introspection leads to variegatedness. So this is the nature of the original building block. That is the absolute truth. Within absolute truth, all the manifestations that we are able to see exist, right? So before we can even understand, of course, this cannot be brought into the empirical science. It is not possible. We cannot make the absolute truth, that which contains everything can become, because nobody, name viduhu suragana, na maharsaya. So, name viduhu suragana. And 10.2, Krishna says, nobody can understand him. Name viduhu suragana. The suragana means even the demigods, they cannot understand him. So so what is something is very interesting is that slowly, even the scientists have started realizing what we are seeing, everything is a form of consciousness. Like, for example, if I see a house, that's also a form of consciousness. A solar system or a food that is being cooked is a form of consciousness. Who cooked, whom it was offered, or it is not offered, based on it is a form of consciousness. Like an art or paint, according to science, they, suppose you make a, you make a painting of a tree, so they can take possibly 100 such paintings and create a distribution, and then they will make a random model by which a painting, will be an outcome. A specific painting would be an outcome. But we know, and scientists also, they see the lacuna in their argument that the painting itself manifests within the consciousness of the person as a whole. And the color and paintbrush, they are simply instrument to put that into a set. So what we see is a form of consciousness. There is nothing beyond consciousness. So this is what I want to tell. What is the level of consciousness? And because this, if I have to go in detail onto that, will be tough to complete this. What I will do is that how we can address a specific level of consciousness for taking Krishna consciousness to every nook and corner of the society. So now what has happened in the society, this neglect of consciousness, this has resulted depression, psychic peasant, behavior disorder, environmental degradation. So many problems have come because of the neglect of consciousness. And I would speculate, I would like to speculate that this century, people will talk more about consciousness, but provided we do something fundamentally different. And before I present what is that 3 levels of consciousness that I'm talking, what is consciousness? You see, I have written some of the definitions that you can look at. An experience at the level of senses and body. For example, hunger, thirst, sexual attraction, fatigue. An experience at the level of mind. Desires, happiness, distress, success, failure. An experience at the level of intellect. Marxism, capitalism, Vedantic philosophy, and so forth. An experience at the level of falsity, Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, male, female, white, black, and so forth. So can you see what is the common here? What is consciousness? In all these 4 definitions, the common is an experience. Consciousness, in the beginning, an experience. In our consciousness, we experience the consciousness. This is a kind of a little mystery here. In our consciousness, we experience our consciousness. This is something little. But what science does, science studies experience, but it doesn't understand the experiencer. This is the mistake. That it cannot talk about the experiencer. It talks about experience, but not the experiencer. And we know that in a conditioned state, experience and experiencer are two different objects, dualism, giving rise to dualism. And when we get liberated, experience and experiencer become one. So this is this particular idea is not there in science. For example, science is making AI machines, right? And trying to present these are, we have really duplicated the human emotion, human ability to reciprocate, interact. But whatever they may do, in a layman can make a distinction between a living organism and a machine, saying a living organism has experience of hunger, fear, sleep, sexual desires. No AI machine can experience, can exhibit these kind of features. Living organism can self-replicate. No machine can self-replicate. It can be creative. There is no creativity and so forth. So simple idea that there is a living and non-living matter. So consciousness, as given to us in Bhagavad Gita, we can see there is a top-down approach and there is a bottom-up approach. In top-down approach, Krishna talks in 2.17, that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. So it is the soul because of which the body is animated. And how do you recognize this? Through consciousness. So that's very subtle form of spread in our entire body, which we don't even recognize. And we have not even, most of us, even if we are practicing Krishna consciousness for 30 years, 40 years, we even don't experience that in its pure, pristine form. And that's what Krishna is saying is indestructible. And then there is an emerging consciousness. And that is material consciousness, 2.70. Krishna talk about a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. That is, the so-called emotions, so-called beliefs, so-called life symptoms, these are all emerging property of consciousness. And scientists, they kind of trying to converse to that. Whereas the real consciousness, that is not subjected to the empirical study. So now let us look at these three levels. One is inert matter. What is inert matter? Always Prabhupada said phenomenal world. What is this phenomenal world? World of experience. So when we talk about phenomenal world, this is called sense objects. The world is categorized in terms of sense objects. That's all. We may talk in terms of car, bungalow, bank balance, and so forth, but finally they are simply sense objects, nothing else, tanmatras. What science has missed is something very profound, and we have not been able to capitalize that. Is called living matter. Okay, and this living matter can be understood in terms of mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. And we have given very, very little importance to it. And most of the time, we as a devotee community, we made a cardinal mistake, only focusing on pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is two parts: Shara, the fallible Jiva; Akshara, the infallible Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? So these are three. Scientists only covered inert matter. I think we have got an opportunity to bring the entire world under the umbrella of Krishna consciousness by taking living matter seriously. How can we talk about living matter in a very scientific way? So this, of course, this itself is a very big topic, and this is a topic that must be discussed in this century to make a bridge between pure materialism to pure spiritualism. What is missing is a living matter. People don't understand, like entire allopathy is based on treating this body is a pure matter. But this body is not a pure matter, this is a living matter. And that is missing in our entire education system, and we need to discuss about this. Look at this. Hardly any one of us, we all speak, we have a language, but we never realize how language is connected to thought. Let's do a thought experiment. What happens if there is no language? Can we still communicate with each other without a language? Which is first? It is thought or language? Where does meaning lie? Is the meaning driver or an inert energy? So these are the questions, fundamental questions that we need to answer. Of course, this is a big topic. Simply, if I want to talk language, thought, the people like Jerry Fodor, Chomsky, they have done a fantastic work. But the problem with them is that they have no idea what is living force. And hence their contribution, although very great in terms of inanimate matter, but they have not touched the level of living matter. Like the Princeton University, the research by Professor Jan, where you put two people in a shielded chamber, they are separated by, there is no electromagnetic communication between them, and they demonstrated that still can communicate, right? So basically, at least this research tried for the first time how to how to see that the mind is still different from the idea of matter that we have. Mind is a matter, but is a different level of matter, right? So if you look at here,
Hare Krishna.
I'll finish just.
I got so mesmerized in your talk, I didn't even realize it's about 6:05. Our next, and we don't even have time now for question answer. Our next speaker is ready and requesting to come on the panel. Could we take? Is it possible you could wrap up in a minute or so?
I'll just wrap up. So,
Thank you.
So the scientific, you can see our paper on short-term enhancement of cognitive function in music, 3-channel model. We published this. We are showing that how Rag Darwari can enhance the cognitive function of a person, and we are able to show that how a brain normally it has a lot of talking. That is, brain has different areas, and there is unnecessary talking going on. But when it is subjected to Rag Darwari, we saw that the cross-talking within the brain goes away and brain becomes cool. And this particular work has been reported in many newspapers, the media houses, and we just have communicated a paper to a psychology journal where we are talking about novel Hare Krishna mantra-based cognitive behavior therapy. And we are showing that those who have problem insomnia, those who cannot sleep properly, we can improve their sleep quality considerably, right? And nowadays, this is a big problem. So what I'm trying to say is that living matter, what are the topics that we can talk about? So I'm giving you, showed you 3 topics. So there are 4 ways we can educate people in Krishna consciousness. One is to promote Vedic holistic values and Vedic ways of life, to preserve and expand rural fabric of the world at large, to explore the scientific truth, there's a mistake there, and to develop a sustainable campus that preserves natural symbiosis. And the journey started with our Gurukul, and you can see that the paper that I showed you just now, I was doing this cognitive behavior, Hare Krishna Mahamantra-based cognitive behavior therapy long back. Here you can see our Gurukul students after, when they do a, proper, mathematics, when you solve mathematics, you really expend a lot of energy. So after that, just before their lunch, I put them into this cognitive behavior therapy, and they feel really free and relaxed, right? So these are, and we can bring these things in terms of scientific findings, how brain really rewires itself. So I will not give it. Let me wrap up things. So finally, and we have taken that, now how we can bring this, when we talk about Bhagavad Gita, how can we reach out online? So we started a journey of learn Gita, live Gita, and then you can see here, this is what we are trying to do in our Gurukul campus. You can see there one, which is a cultural block. We are building a big temple with a lot of facilities for cultural programs there, with the Center for Performing Arts, and then we have academic block where we are talking about.
Prabhu, I'll have to apologize.
Sorry. So these are okay. So we are in the process of setting up a Brindaranyam college, you can see there, and leading to Brindaranyam University. So basically, what is the conclusion? Conclusion is consciousness is the source of everything. Even the living matter, the force is consciousness. So how can we bring, that means we can emphasize the living matter in our day-to-day life, a synergy among all living matter, and drive our education, and that can drive our cow protection, organic farming, whether we build cities, universities, family life. How can we bring this consciousness in a scientific way? This must be studied in all perspective. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry I have taken more time. Initially I thought this is 30 minutes, but later
I hope that we had the whole day for this discussion, and I am looking forward to organizing a symposium where we can get thought leaders within our society just on this topic of consciousness, because that's something that we need to explore. I'll also like to mention to everyone that we're working very closely. We're going, as ministry, we are working together with Srila Prabhupada in the next few months to really consolidate our effort around Srila Prabhupada's books, especially the Bhagavad Gita, and how to make that as a medium to establish this missing link. So thank you, Srila Prabhu, and we look forward to your participation again in the next symposium. On that note, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Krishnendu Prabhu from Australia. Krishnendu Prabhu has been involved with the movement in many capacities, but in order to make sure that I don't take more time of his presentation, I hand over the symposium to Krishnendu Prabhu, who will share with you now, having understood the basis of consciousness. The next 3 sessions that we are going to, next 3 speakers that we have in this session are going to talk about application of principles of Krishna consciousness. And the first one is talking about Kaumaram to Yavanam. Krishnendra Prabhu, you do have complete 25 minutes, including question answers. I take full responsibility for adjusting the schedule. So please go ahead and take your 25 minutes, but please leave about 4 or 5 minutes for question answers at the end. I invite you and request you to take over the symposium. Thank you.
Hey, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, just a brief introduction about myself and why I've chosen this topic. The topic is Kaumaram to Yovanam, which is basically talking about the transition from childhood to adulthood. And specifically, I'm looking at the transition here, particularly from the viewpoint of boys. Now, why is that? It's because I have a 14-year-old son, and it's a very real reality for me at the moment to see how I can guide him in the best way as he's making that transition from being a boy into being an adult. And you can physically see it, you can experience it by seeing his actions and his behavior. And it's an interesting challenge. So I'm going to share my screen now. And it's this, no, that's the screen. I want to share this window. Here we go. All right, so here's the cover picture showing the famous changing bodies. It's quite interesting in Bhagavad Gita that it talks about the Kaumaram Yovanam Jara. It mentions from childhood to youth to old age. It doesn't talk anything about adulthood. In fact, this word Yovanam is basically adulthood. Before that, there is a period called Kaishoram, and that's the age from like 10 to 15. So we're basically preparing our children for adulthood. So let's just continue on here. The thesis that I have today is that Srila Prabhupada's vision is based on traditional models. So things that have been practiced in traditional cultures for many, many years, particularly in India, as naturally Prabhupada has that background. And I believe that the teachings that Srila Prabhupada has given us on this subject can be the solution for many of society's problems, and that it's quite different from the modern life that we're all living. Whether we're part of the Krishna consciousness movement trying to practice bhakti, or if we're just a regular person out in the world. So let's just have a look here at what are some of the issues that we face today. You know, as you can see in the picture, we've got these screens. It's something new. Even when Prabhupada was present, these screens were not really around. Television had just started. So therefore the context changes, but the principles generally stay the same. So we have social media. This is one of the challenges that we're facing today. What are the challenges with social media? There's a lot of, well, just as in real life, there's bullying. There's now something called cyberbullying, where children are getting harassed through text messages and things like that, to the point where sometimes kids commit suicide. And why cyberbullying is worse than regular bullying in some ways is because the medium, the so-called social medium, is kind of anonymous. You will say things to people on social media that you will not say in real life. And therefore, the level of hurtfulness that can be expressed may be more, and it's very harmful for people too. The other aspect of it is that the cyberbullying, when someone receives that message, there may be nobody else present, nobody else even knows about it. And so this private aspect and not being able to talk to others about it is another thing that makes it quite scary. Another thing about social media is it can create false expectations and a competition. We look at the other people's posts. They're really enjoying in this material world. Look at the car that they've got. Look at their girlfriend. Look at the fun that they're having. What we don't think about is that people only post on social media the highlights of their life, all the good things that are happening. They don't post up, the time when they messed up, when they got angry, when they got depressed. Generally, these are not the things that get shared on social media. And therefore, we can kind of get the idea that, everybody else is enjoying in the material world. I'm the only one who's not. And of course, this is not very helpful for our Krishna consciousness. if we have that conception. So another point is, of course, illicit sex. It's a big topic. You know, these days the social norms are quite different from how they were traditionally. It's a much freer society, and it's considered socially acceptable for boys and girls just to meet up and engage in illicit affairs and then just kind of move on. It's considered acceptable, although there are certainly consequences of this. Now at school, they try to have some sexual education programs. However, what do they teach in these programs? All they basically teach is how to not get pregnant when you have sex and how to not get diseases when you have sex. If there's any talk about self-control or abstinence, you know, the standards sexual education programs, they don't even talk about this. And if someone brings it up, they're looked down on. It's like, don't be ridiculous. Of course, these young people want to have sex, and why should we stop them? It's one of the joys of life. You know, and they have this concept. And I did a Google search just today on a program called Sex Respect that was recommended to me. And all I could find was people criticizing, oh, this is just so unrealistic. This abstinence is a very bad thing. So it's amazing, isn't it, how things change? Previously, chastity was valued, but now the values are completely opposite. We'll keep on moving. Now, just before I continue, I did want to actually say at the beginning that I want to give credit to Urmila Mataji for many of the things that I'm speaking about. I've listened to many of her podcasts on these subjects, and a big portion of what I'm speaking about I learned from her. And I've also, you know, continued to develop my own ideas around these things. But I want to give credit where credit is due. That I've learned so much from Urmila Mataji. And if you are interested to learn more about these topics, I highly recommend her podcast called Bhakti Quest by Edith Best, I believe it's called. And in that podcast, if you search, you can find different topics. So what I did is I went through and I searched for all the topics about education, children, parenting, and these types of things. And that's the basis for a lot of what I'm speaking about here, you know, along with a few of my own ideas that I've added on. All right, so the next thing that we look at is addictions. So the first addiction that we generally tend to think about is drugs, but there are other addictions as well. Video games. I'm sure you would have noticed, just like in this picture, these kids are on their devices. And many times what they're doing is they're playing games. And I have firsthand experience or secondhand experience. Anyway, I've observed how these games are so addictive, and they're designed in such a way that it makes you want to keep on the game and never stop. So if you've ever tried to tell a kid to get off a computer game, you'll know what I'm talking about. Oh, no, I just need to. The games create this mentality. So there's a lot of psychology behind these games. It produces dopamine, makes you feel good, makes you want to go to the next level. Some of these games are based around social experience as well, that while you're playing the game, you get on the phone, so to speak, you get on a call with others who are playing the game, that are your friends, and it becomes part of your social experience as well. And these games can just suck up so much time in the day. Not only time, but these games today, often they give you the incentive to pay money so that you can get more power in the game. If you can't earn it, you have to pay to get another weapon or to get a better looking costume and things like that. So this is definitely one of the addictions which is very prominent today, which is certainly not helpful. And also the violence. This is one thing that Prabhupada referred to as well when he was talking about television, that there was so much violence. Well, these computer games are very often based on violence and not very helpful for our Krishna consciousness. So I mentioned drugs. There's not too much to say about that other than it's again become normalized, just like we were talking about the illicit sex. The drugs is very commonplace in the schools, the regular schools, at least in New Zealand. I'm sure it's the same in most places. And is that something we really want our kids to be exposed to? I don't think so. Now, porn. Porn is extremely addictive, and it's something which, again, has been normalized in the schools. I've spoken to quite a few kids at high school, and they have told me that, yeah, drugs and porn, it's just, accepted as normal. However, there are some people who are trying to fight against this in the sense of they realize the consequences of becoming absorbed in porn. Just to name a few. One is that this is a boys' problem, basically, is that boys get an unrealistic idea of what sex is about. So when they get into a relationship, they feel disappointed and not satisfied because of this false conception that they had. Because they've been aroused so much artificially, then they can't, find the proper connection when they are in a relationship like that. Another thing about it is just the physical effect, which is explained in our Shastras, but it's not really recognized in the mainstream, is that one drop of semen is equal to 64 drops of blood, according to Ayurveda. So it means that when someone is engaging in this type of illicit sexual activity and releasing semen, which is basically what porn is all about, the life force is leaving the body, and it makes a man weak. And when the man becomes weak, then it affects the relationships between the men and women as well. And so in so many ways, this is very, very harmful. And of course, when I was a young boy, they had something called porn, but it wasn't what we have today. It was some magazine that, your dirty old uncle had hiding in his cupboard. But nowadays, you just have to pick up a phone and it can just practically pop up on your screen. It's just so accessible. And then when you go to school and there's others doing it, I was just recently hearing a boy who goes to high school. He's a young man, I should say. He must be about 15. He said that the boys, they sit in the back of maths class with their phones and they look at porn during maths class. So, this is how addictive it is and how prevalent it is in mainstream schools today. So expanding on this is the indoctrination that comes. Now, actually, I think many of these things that we could talk about, just to be a bit frank here, is that the mainstream schools are probably the best place to find out about all these things and to be exposed to them. And in particular, some of the indoctrination is, the materialism. The school has been created by people with an atheistic and materialistic worldview in general. And the whole goal is how to increase your economic situation so you can enjoy your senses better. A bit like what Hiranyakashipu was instructing his teachers to teach about. It's also creating an employee mindset. So this is what's described in Srimad Bhagavatam as overdependence on another's mercy. Srila Prabhupada was not into this. Prabhupada wanted devotees to be independent. He wanted them to, he didn't want them to become, as he would call, technologists, an expert in computers or an expert in machinery or something. And then you just have to go and beg from a business owner to become their dog. Like Prabhupada would say, you take the degree like a bone, you put it between your teeth like a dog and you go begging for a master. So Prabhupada wasn't in favor of this because it weakens our freedom and it weakens our position. Prabhupada preferred that we had an independent livelihood as far as possible. He didn't want our members of society to become like Sudras, which means employee. He wanted to create leaders of society, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. But this is one of the mentalities that is taught at school. The whole mentality is, okay, go to school, get good grades, go to university. With that degree, then you can go and get a good job and, get a mortgage and buy a house, and along with your, student loan that you have to pay off. And so you have so much debt towards the banks, and you're in such a compromised position because of this, rather than learning to maintain ourselves independently by, living off the land, or at least having a business like a contractor or something where you have more independence. Another type of indoctrination that you find in the I mean, especially here in New Zealand, mainstream schools, is the attack on family values. There's a very strong culture, at least here, basically attacking the idea that having a marriage between a man and a woman is the foundation of society, that this is the best social structure for raising children. Their whole conception is that whatever you want to do, that's fine. If you don't want to get married, it doesn't matter. If you just want to have connections with anybody, go ahead. Why the need for marriage? And so these are some of the values that are really emphasized, unfortunately, these days. Rather than trying to encourage people to fit into the traditional roles, they're telling people, oh, you should just reject the roles. And it's not, if you fit into the traditional roles, then there's something wrong with you. You should be, experimenting more and, breaking free from these family values that have been the foundation for our society for so many thousands of years. Anyway, I could go on that for a while, but I'll move on. So, as we can see, that there's some quite big problems in our society. A lot of them are very much propagated through our schools. All right, so let's have a look at some principles here that we can apply to help our kids navigate this this transition from childhood to adulthood. So I'll just quickly list them out here, and then I'll go into them each in more detail. So the kind of association that we give our children, engaging our children in a way that's very meaningful, nurturing values, in other words, counteracting the indoctrination that may be coming through the mainstream media or schools, developing a good lifestyle and habits, creating a positive association with Krishna consciousness so that the kids naturally want to do it, and creating a social structure that supports a positive life for Krishna consciousness development. Okay, so let's start with association. First point here that I'd like to emphasize is that as parents, it's really important that we develop empathy for our children, that we develop a very strong bond. It's said in the Shastra that the relationship with the Guru is a very strong bond of love and friendship. So as the first gurus of our children, we also need to develop this with our children, so that when any issues may come along in future, they have the trust to come to us and speak to us about them. Whereas if we're very judgmental and we don't listen to our kids, we rather tell them what to do all the time, it'll be much more difficult, to influence them in a positive way. As well as this, it's very helpful if as we're growing up, young people can have someone that they look up to as a mentor or guru. It doesn't have to be a big guru in the sense of, a Diksha guru. It could just be an adult who's, very established in their Krishna consciousness, who's a very good role model that they can build a relationship with and learn to, aspire to be like. This is also true in terms of vocation, not just in terms of a spiritual life, but, if there's a devotee who's got a profession and they can mentor us, it helps us to build our Krishna consciousness and connect it with our vocation as well. All right. So in terms of, where are you up to? Association, okay. So in terms of this association with adults, I think this is particularly important when someone reaches to puberty, because typically this is what life is like in the modern world. From a very young age, you're put into childcare. So you're just associating mostly with kids your own age. And it remains like this until the age of 18 or even more, that you're in a class with people of the same age. And you don't really interact or associate much with those of other ages. So this gives a very unbalanced outlook on life. And it just kind of like amplifies the immaturity. So especially when we're talking about youth, that if the children or the youth that are becoming adults can associate more with adults, then they'll tend to become more like adults. They'll mature in a very nice way. Whereas if they're with kids the same age, they tend to, keep at each other's level. It's also helpful to have association of all different ages. This is a natural society that we help those younger than us, and we look up to those that are older than us. In this way, everybody grows and helps each other, rather than feeling a sense of competition. When kids are all the same age, there's often a competitive spirit. So anyway, this is where the idea of associating with adults is an important point to keep in mind, that we shouldn't just keep our kids only with those of the same age. All right, now let's talk about engagement. Engagement's a really important point here. So the key thing here I'd like to emphasize, and it relates back to the previous point, is that youth doesn't begin, adulthood doesn't begin at puberty. It's not like, oh, my kid's a teenager, now I need to start doing something. You have to be preparing your children while they're children, so that when it comes time for puberty, that they've already been prepared. So let's just have a look at a few of the notes here. One of the things is giving responsibility from a very young age. When you're very young, you may have limited abilities, but whatever the ability is, we should engage the children. And we can see this in India. You've got these children who are 3 years old and they're carrying a 6-month-old baby, so the older child is only 3, but they're still showing care for the other child. Or if you go outside the gate in Mayapur and you see them cooking the samosas, and it's like a 5-year-old child who's putting the samosas into the boiling hot oil. So they're learning real responsibilities, not just pretending. And like Prabhupada talked about, making a cake out of mud, just pretending. No, we're talking about doing real service. An example would be even a very young child, maybe like at the temple, could welcome the guests when they arrive. These are some services, or they could help to put the mats out on the floor for people when they're ready to sit down. So there's so many things that can be done. Also in deity worship, Prabhupada said that deity worship is not until you're 10 years or older. And of course, in the temple, until you're Brahmin initiated, you can't do it. But we know that there's so many services that you can do before Brahmin initiation. And when the devotee joins, they do so many things like cleaning, helping to prepare. So children can also do these things. And it gets them excited about the prospect of, doing the deity worship, when they're a little older. So anyway, we can start with this from a very young age. And it's so important. And this is going back to the addictions. Why are computer games so addictive? It's because there's a challenge. You have a sense of achievement. You get into a flow state. You have the ability to master something. We can also find the same thing with Rubik's Cubes, or doing sports, things like that, that the same kind of the same concept is there. And in this way, when we can engage our kids in real life activities, then it helps to compensate, it gives them that feeling, and they don't have to compensate with these other things like computer games. And then as they're increasing their responsibility as they grow up, it means that when they enter their youth, they can have the skills to have an independent livelihood. All right, let's go to the next step. So the next step is about habits and lifestyles. So I'll go a bit quickly through this.
Krishnendu Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Sorry to interrupt your presentation. Prabhu, we've come to 25 minutes. There are a couple of questions.
I thought I had 1 more minute according to my timer.
Sure. Okay. Would you like
to? I'll jump to my summary page, and then we'll see if there's any question. All right. So the basic sadhana, and one thing I'd like to suggest is that having small gurukulas, residential based education, can be helpful, like the chatuspatis we've been hearing about, but by providing a home environment where the actual morning program can be practiced, can be helpful. Positive experiences, making it fun. And then also the other thing I'd like to emphasize is that having a young marriage is a very helpful thing, because we talked about this illicit sex, that the abstinence critics, they say, oh, no one can be abstinent. And in general, they're actually right. So if we have marriage from a very young age, then when the children turn into adults and they have these sexual strong hormones acting at the age of teenagers, they're already married, they have that facility to express that without causing a disturbance in society. So here's the summary of all my points here. Give responsibility from a young age so they can grow into it. Make sure that there's association with all ages, particularly adult association to grow into again. Avoid the mainstream media and schools. The indoctrination is not healthy. Let's see if we can have small schools where we can actually practice the Krishna consciousness lifestyle. And let's see if we can marry our kids young, because it'll make it a lot easier for them if they're married young than trying to artificially remain celibate in such a society that doesn't value it. So, I'll stop there. And if there's still any time, I can take a question or so.
Krishnendu Prabhu, revolutionary thoughts. First point of correction, Krishnendu Prabhu is based in New Zealand. And the thoughts that you're presenting here are revolutionary, because even within the circles of devotee communities, they're not often discussed. Young marriages, small residential schools, avoid mainstream media and schools. Wow, very thought-provoking. I encourage all the participants who feel very inspired to be in touch with Krishnendu Prabhu. Krishnendu Prabhu, could you please post your contact details, if it's okay, so that devotees can be in touch with you if they want to discuss this further?
Sure. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat, my contact.
Thank you. There was a question with respect to gaming and its addiction, but you sort of covered it.
Okay.
And I want to thank you a lot. I hope that we can discuss this also a little bit together offline.
Sure.
And see what can be done in this regard. So
yeah, hopefully it's planted the seed of just questioning the default method that we've been living and seeing if there are better alternatives.
Yes, I mean, the question here is that the seed was planted by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada himself. I mean, the points that you're stating were loud and clear by Srila Prabhupada in the 60s and 70s. He established these small schools, rural living, and whatnot. But I do hope that when it's brought up in a forum like this, in a symposium like this, it's rekindled. And hopefully this time we are able to fan the spark further. And the only way it will happen is if more devotees come together to take this forward. That's the hope of the symposium, and that's the reason I requested you devotees here who feel inspired to be in touch with Krishnendu Prabhu and take this forward. Thank you, Prabhu. Very grateful for your time and for your participation. Very, very enthusiastic participation throughout the symposium, I noticed. I'm grateful. I'd like to now invite our next speaker, Her Grace Devaki Mataji. So we just now heard from Krishnendu Prabhu about challenges of moving into adulthood, adolescence. The next speaker is going to talk to us about a life after householder life, Vanaprastha Ashrama. And the devotees who are present here can please refer to the handout that I've circulated on a Google Drive link, because Mataji is going to refer to that in her discussion today. So I'm going to hand it over to Devaki Mataji. I've also taken the privilege to just rename it on the screen so the devotees are familiar with you. And going to request. Okay, thank you. Welcome. And we are taking total 25 minutes, 20 minutes for the talk, 5 minutes for the question answers. So I hand over the symposium to you, Devaki Mataji. Could you please say something so that I can confirm that we're able to hear you loud and clear?
Hare Krishna.
You are soft. You are soft. You'll have to be a bit louder if it's possible.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
It's still very soft. Do you have some sort of headphones or something which can
Well,
make your voice?
I've got a good mic, which I usually use in all Zoom programs. So I don't know how this comes.
Now this is good. Now this is very good. When you were just holding it closer, it
Okay.
was loud and clear. I apologize that I have to do this, but I would really like devotees to be able to hear you
Yes,
well.
of course. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. I hand over the symposium to you. Try to please speak up. I know it's early morning, very, very early morning for you in Germany. But if you can, please muster the lung power to speak up. It will help us appreciate your message. Thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this and present a topic which is very close to my heart, the need for education in regards to the Vanaprastha ashram. Because I think we have to clearly understand that there is a tremendous lack of training and education in this importance of this ashram. And we can almost say there is no deeper understanding of this crucial phase in life, which is so important to, prepare ourselves to go back to Godhead. And as a result of that, we can almost say Vanaprastha ashram is not established, it's not existing. So, and this relates very clearly to the topic of culture, because a non-devotee's attitude towards old age and elderly people is very different than a devotee's attitude towards old age and elderly people. So a non-devotee, the attitude towards elderly people of society is basically neglect. The elderly people are seen as a burden, they're pushed aside into old age homes. And the expectation on old age and retirement is basically that it is a last chance to one more time enjoy to the maximum. And the expectation is a comfortable life in leisure, surrounded by family members, by charming grandchildren. So that's kind of the outlook of a non-devotee. But then the attitude and outlook of a devotee towards old age and elderly people, very different. In fact, it is completely opposite. So there, elderly people are treated with respect, with inquiry, because the understanding is there. They have so much life experience and wisdom. And the mood is there that we serve them in humility and we care for them. And there is a sense of gratitude there because they're leaving us so much, which we can use now to further practice our Krishna consciousness and preach. So, and there, we want to deepen and internalize our spiritual practice. So, and increase our dependence on the Lord and his devotees. And we, for that, we embrace tapasya. So not, a comfortable life and leisure, but renunciation, tapasya. And the idea is there that we're meant to detach ourselves from the charming grandchildren, which does not, of course, mean that we cannot have contact with them, but without attachment and too much emotional involvement. So, yeah, the understanding is there. We have to break this attachment to the family members. Otherwise, there's a risk to take birth again. So now, let us understand that the 4 ashrams are actually Krishna's perfect system to prepare us for going back to Godhead. And each ashram gives stability and harmony in this material world. And if we are situated in each ashram, and each ashram also has its purifying duties, and it actually gives protection through these purifying duties. And it is in this way the perfect system to prepare us for death, for going back to Godhead. So now, interestingly, the brahmachari ashram sets really the foundation to the grihastha ashram. So a good brahmachari will also be a good grihastha. And a good brahmachari after the grihastha ashram will very naturally move on to the vanaprastha ashram, because he's got that taste from tapasya, from deeper absorption, which he experienced in his brahmachari life. So that taste is there, the memories are there. So then it will be very natural to move on to the vanaprastha ashram. And another point is also that the grihastha ashram actually sets the foundation to the vanaprastha ashram. Because if our family life actually was an ashram, meaning Bhagavatam, holy name, has to be the center of our family life, otherwise it's not an ashram. So, but if our family life was an ashram, then the necessary purification and spiritual maturity will be there to move on to the renounced phase of life. But if our family life was not an ashram, then yeah, that maturity and purification will not be there. So vanaprastha ashram, not just a question of age, but spiritual maturity and purification, which we receive when we actually mold our family life into an ashram. So now, I mean, I have to add, I have actually a 15-hour course on this topic, and I'm facing the challenge here to summarize a 15-hour course in 15-20 minutes. So I'm trying my best, and I'm sorry if I have to rush through things a little bit. And yeah, so let me share one little quote from 7th canto, 12th chapter, the summary. There Prabhupada says, after the grihastha ashram is another ashram known as the vanaprastha, which is midway between grihastha and sannyas. So this is a very nice explanation, a very short definition of what the vanaprastha ashram is. And we can accept the mood and the underlying principles of the vanaprastha ashram, and we can apply them wherever we may live. So, you know, vanaprastha doesn't mean we have to go to the forest, but we are simply extricating the underlying principles, and they can be applied in New York or Sydney or wherever it may be. So one of the main principles is, of course, no more sex life, and the worldly and family duties, they're naturally reducing anyway. And when we strive for this vanaprastha ashram, we will more consciously reduce them, our involvement in family duties, work, business, and so on. And we do that in order to increase our absorption in spiritual practice. So we increase austerity. We are actually minimizing comfort and material attachments. We're switching from external activities and achievements to internal activities and achievements. So this is a very important point that we have to, because external achievements, they are more satisfying to the false ego. So we have to gradually let go of them and switch towards internal activities and achievements, because they are satisfying for the soul. So unless we make the switch voluntarily, then a health crisis will force us. And then we may face a vacuum there. We will maybe fall into some kind of midlife crisis, some depression. Oh, now nobody needs me anymore, and so on. So we have to build up a rich internal spiritual life. So then we have something to fall back on, and best to make this switch voluntarily rather than waiting until the body forces us. So in vanaprastha ashram ultimately also means we are increasing our dependence on the Lord, right? And we delegate our responsibilities to the younger generation and allowing them to take charge. So again, that's a very important point. We will get back to that later. And a husband and wife, they spend more time either together or separately in the holy dham, serving at a temple, preaching, so that it can have a variety of forms, how we actually practically live it. This depends on our natures, our abilities, and so on. So there's a lot of misconception in our society, unfortunately, that Vanaprastha ashram means husband puts on saffron and walks out at night. But this is irresponsibility in the name of Vanaprastha ashram. No, it's a team thing. Husband and wife work together, and gradually they do things more separately, give each other more space. And this should be actually the natural tendency after having been married for many years. So it is not artificial. So, and of course, the Vanaprastha ashram is a new challenge in life. And it has to be accepted under guidance of more experienced devotees who have already some experience in mastering this challenge. Very natural, right? That we take guidance of a Vanaprastha couple who helps us to move forward in this direction. So now in general, the most valuable duty and contribution of the Vanaprasthas is actually that they share their life experience. They have accumulated so much wisdom, so many realizations, and they're meant to pass down that life experience, also the values and the knowledge they should pass down and to the younger generation, and they give shelter and guidance to them. You see, they serve as mentors actually. That's the main and foremost contribution of this ashram. And because this mentorship understanding is not so much established in ISKCON, so if the highly important contribution is not valued of the ashram, then how can the ashram actually manifest if we don't value the contribution? So, and of course, if the Vanaprasthas actually serve in that capacity, that immensely supports and protects actually the sannyas ashram, right? Yeah, so now let me briefly touch upon the effects which it has on our society if this ashram is not being properly established. So our ISKCON communities, they miss out on the wealth of life experience. There's so much unused potential there, right? Because all these senior grihastha couples, they have so much to share, and we are simply missing out completely. They're sitting idle. Very often I observe this on my travels. So, and also the younger generation also misses out because they don't receive this valuable guidance, and therefore they run with their family problems to their sannyasi gurus, and that burdens them. They're not even meant to get involved in family issues. So the Vanaprasthas, they have the experience, they should guide them, right? So in the devotees, because the ashram is not established, the devotees may remain attached to their positions, to their titles, and they're not handing over the responsibilities to the next generation. And this invites stagnation on all levels, on the individual level of the senior person, on the level of the younger generation surrounding them, and project at large. It becomes stagnant because every generation has their valuable contribution to make in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. So if this handing over does not take place, then things become stagnant. So in the senior devotees, miss out on cultivating the mood of renunciation and detachment from deeper family ties. And this entangles them, and therefore there is a risk to take one more time birth in the material world, and that we want to avoid. So we could, basically the essence is, we could have so much more senior full-time devotees and preachers if we establish this Vanaprastha ashram more clearly. And yeah, if young devotees don't receive this education in this regard, then they will not plan their life accordingly. They may enter married life when they're 48, starting off with babies. The men, ladies, of course, a little earlier, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, with 48, we are not meant to start with family life. But this happens so often because this education is not given. So ultimately, establishing the Vanaprastha ashram is all a matter of educating devotees, systematic educating and training them, because of this different worldview which we are surrounded by through materialistic culture. You know, we don't so easily naturally move into the opposite mood of facing old age. So now very quickly, and this will be basically my last points of this humble little presentation. And there is three main and foremost principles of the Vanaprastha ashram, which again, we simply extract. We imagine living in the forest. There is very simple, practical principles which we can apply wherever we are. And it is a gradual process to implement them in our life. It's a question of meditation. That's why it's good to get this education at young age, not only when we are 50 or 55, but almost a little late to meditate on these things. So principle number one is simplifying our life. Yes, we live simple. We simplify our environment. So, and we do that by, you know, simplifying our surroundings. We're keeping only the absolutely necessary things to keep body and soul together. We imagine living in Vrindavan in a room, simple little room. So there's not that much fancy furniture there and lounges and decoration and so just simplifying. And we do this practically by simply getting rid of many household things which are not really required, which we have accumulated. Household life, people accumulate so much stuff, you know. So we give them in charity to the young grihastas who start off their grihasta life. Because all items which we are attached to, they occupy some little space in our mind. So it's actually very liberating to free ourselves from so many things which we have collected, you know. And we will have to leave everything behind anyway. So better voluntarily rather than being forced by death, right? So like that, we get the benefit and joy of giving in charity to the young generation. So that's principle number one, simplifying our surroundings. So then principle number two is simplify our external appearance. And this is especially important, of course, for us ladies, because female body brings along more bodily identification, because we are meant to bring color and beauty into life. That's why we like to make ourselves pretty and decorate ourselves. But that has to be reduced and given up ultimately in Vanaprastha ashram. So that means we simplify our dress. Gradually, we give up wearing makeup and ornaments. We go more in subdued colors and gradually into white with a border. That's Vanaprastha life. But widow is no border. It's just white. So, and this has to be gradually and internally cultivated. It's not simply a matter of externally accepting it. Otherwise, it becomes just another fashion. So we don't want that. It has to be, you know, matching to the internal mood. And that reduces immensely our bodily concept, gross and subtle also, because fashion is very much also can, you know, feed the false ego and so on. So it's actually natural because our body gets less and less materially attractive anyway and ultimately falling apart. So it is actually Krishna's system, you know, to cultivate bodily detachment. So no need to artificially try and make the Buddha look young, coloring the hair, anti-wrinkle creams, face lift, and all this kind of thing. Devotees don't get into these things, but actually, believe it or not, I have met devotees who do get into cosmetic surgery. Oh my God, all for preaching. No, let the wrinkles come. It's good for preaching. Then people take us more seriously when the hair is a little gray and so on, you know. So, and for men, of course, there is also the idea there to simplify their externals. And that includes also reducing attachment to gadgets, fancy watches, aftershave, whatever their attachment may be, or also fancy clothing. Some men like to dress up in fancy quarters and all that. So for men, it is also there, but I dare say for women, it is more prominent. Yeah, so that's the second principle, simplifying our external appearance. So now the third and last principle is we simplify our eating. And many people say that's the toughest, you know, because the tongue always wants to enjoy. But again, our digestion becomes weaker anyway. Our body is not designed to enjoy the tongue. Anybody over 60 or even 55 knows that very clearly, you know. So it's Krishna's system to give up this desire to enjoy the tongue. And otherwise, if we don't do this, we become massively overweight in old age because we're not burning it up so much anymore. And we may get sick. So better to do this voluntarily and cultivate the internal mood. So, and yeah, gradually the body will fall apart. We will lose control over all the bodily functions. And we have to accept the service and help from the devotees around us. So this immensely dissolves the false ego and the controlling propensity. So, and all that is meant to actually deepen our spiritual practice, our chanting, our hearing, so that we are ready to go home back to Godhead. Okay, so let us see.
As to say, may the words come true, that we do become ready to go back home, back to Godhead. There is a question.
Yes.
What age for Vanaprastha ashram?
Well, in the handouts, which you may have, or you have the link to download, there I have included a lot of quotes, you know, because Prabhupada, again and again, there's so many quotes in the Bhagavatam where he says 50, 50, 50, you know, and sometimes he says sooner or later, or as soon as possible when a person reaches 50. So, but that only works out if we accept, you know, Krishna's recommendations how to go through the other ashrams. That, you know, the system is that around a lady should get married around 18 or even earlier, a man between 25, 27, 28, something like that. So if we arrange our life like that, then the kids will be practically grown up when we are 50, you know. And at 50, I mean, I'm 62 now, so at 50, you still have some energy to serve and do things and absorb ourselves, you know. So that's the age, and Prabhupada says, before we become invalid, you know, that's the whole idea. Before we become invalid, you know, we leave home every now and again, go traveling, go here, go there, come back. So it's a gradual thing, you know. But 50, Prabhupada always sets this mark of 50, you know.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so devotees, we just heard from Devaki Mataji about the importance of Vanaprastha ashram. The previous speaker spoke about, Krishnendu Prabhu spoke about how to handle adolescence. Obviously, it would be nice if we had more speakers speaking also about Grihastha ashram, and we may have that in the future. I'd like to invite our next speaker, Kantya Prabhu. If you can hear me, I've sent you a request to be panelist so that you can get onto the panel as early as possible. If I also renamed you from at SBG to Kontea Das, and I hope it is the right person that I did rename. Could you please just raise your hand if that was not you, because the request is pending. So thank you, Devaki Mataji. We are inviting our next speaker now. I encourage devotees to please be in touch with Devaki Mataji. We are going to post her contact details. Anybody who wants to be in touch, she's written books on these topics. You can view that. Okay. Thank you. So, Kante Prabhu, you're in.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, welcome to the symposium. Kante Prabhu currently serves in many capacities as a co-minister for Congregation Development Ministry, also the co-chair for Organizational Development Committee, bringing in various important recommendations for the GBC body. Kante Prabhu, I'd not like to eat into your time for the presentation too much. Over to you for the symposium on this very important topic of training, education for spiritual masters, Guru. Thank you.
Thank you, Tapamishra Prabhu. Let me share my screen. So, preparation for future gurus. We'll talk about three things. First, that ideally, every devotee should become guru, should become a teacher, preceptor. That was the spirit of Lord Chaitanya, and that was the explicit desire of Srila Prabhupada, as we will see. Next, being a guru, three sociological approaches, and how do they apply to ISKCON. And third, we'll give a brief analysis of a recent GBC resolution on preparing gurus. So let's start with a series of quotes from Srila Prabhupada. There are many more, actually. These are all chronological, and they should demonstrate that Srila Prabhupada wanted all of his disciples and all his future followers to take this responsibility to become guru. I won't get into the details of Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, because a Diksha Guru is simply a Shiksha Guru who formally accepts disciples, giving them the names and so on. I wish that in my absence, all my disciples become the bona fide spiritual masters. So Srila Prabhupada was saying this as early as 67. Maybe by 1975, all of my disciples will be allowed to initiate and increase the numbers of the generation. So he had this vision in 69 that within 6 years, all the devotees will be allowed to accept disciples. There's an exchange here. Mohsin Hassan asks, after you, is it any decision has been made who will take over? Prabhupada, yes, all of them will take over. The students who are initiated from me, all of them will act as I'm doing. All these disciples which I'm making, initiating, they're being trained to become future spiritual masters. Whoever is initiated is competent to make disciples. 1971. Treya Rishi asks, does a spiritual master have to be designated by the former spiritual master? Srila Prabhupada, so far designation is concerned, the spiritual master authorizes every one of his disciples, but it is up to the disciple to carry out the order. 1972. Every student is expected to become acharya. Acharya means one who knows the scriptural injunctions and follows them practically in life and teaches them to his disciples. I want to see my disciples become bona fide spiritual master and spread Krishna consciousness very widely. that will make me and Krishna very happy. This is a letter from 1975. We require hundreds and thousands of gurus, but not cheaters. This is the time when requires hundreds and thousands of gurus, 1976. There are many more quotes. I just selected a few, but I hope they're enough for you to get the idea. Srila Prabhupada wanted, desired, wished that all his disciples will take this responsibility. Ideally, obviously, they will need to be sincere, they will need to be serious, they will need to have a minimum of seniority or experience, but that's certainly Srila Prabhupada's desire. So being a guru, 3 sociological approaches, 3 environments, 3 cultural setups or mental models. The first is the village guru, a guru active in a very limited, circumscribed situation. Second is the math approach, organized, but we are going to see still quite insulated. And number 3 is the university approach, a single institution, but with many professors and possibly thousands of students. So let's see. First of all, village guru. Imagine a village in India, it's a small place, and the guru necessarily will have just a few disciples. This will be the diagram: 1 guru, 1 teacher, and a few disciples, 7, 8, 10, 20. The scope is limited, the environment is limited. And this model is also limited because often what happens, the succession is through seminal lines. The guru has a son, or in Bengal, a daughter also. And then the son or the daughter becomes the next guru. And so the cyclic succession continues like this. And this is a little shaky, it's a little dangerous because there is no quality control. It's very easy that the teachings and the standards become contaminated. The chain gets broken. So the village guru approach is quite limited in space, in time, and also in quality. Then the math approach. Why this silence? Because that's the idea of the math approach. There is one institution, it can have 1 temple, 1 ashram, or many more, but generally, with a few notable exceptions, but generally there is 1 guru. And each math is independent. Each math is separate. For instance, you have a monastery, you have a temple, you have an establishment, and in each of these establishments, there is a guru represented by the dot at the top, but they are all like silos. Some of the dots inside represent disciples, can be godbrothers of the guru, and there are different levels of experience, seniority, knowledge, but each mat is its own silos. Therefore, there is a lack of cross-pollination. There's a lack of variety. The mat generally becomes attractive only to a particular set of people. And also, same issue as with the village guru approach, there is a very high level of danger to contaminate the teachings, to compromise the standards. Some mat may decide to initiate with 16 rounds, some mats with 8 rounds, some mats with 4 rounds, some mats with 1 round, some mats with no round. And they're independent. So there's not really an overarching quality control. Also, when somebody wants to become a guru and start initiating their own disciples, generally they have to split from the mat. Imagine this two devotees who are good brothers of the guru. Now they also want to be the guru, so they have to go and create their own mat. So fragmentation is implicit, is designed in the system. And fragmentation brings a weakness to the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Now let's see the university approach, which is ostensibly ISKCON's approach. The university is one institute, one institution. It can have different branches, it can have hundreds of teachers in some cases, and can have thousands of students, but is one institution. This is the photo from the latest SGGS, the Sangha of Gurus, GBCs and Sannyasis, held in Mayapur in 2019. And it's a picture of different spiritual leaders, most of them initiating spiritual masters, all of them Shiksha Gurus, who come together to discuss the future of the movement and other relevant topics. So this is the image of shared leadership. Now, while facilitating personal guidance and mentorship through individual Shiksha and Diksha relations, the university approach offers the widest variety of Shiksha in terms of styles, in terms of expertise. There will be the guru very absorbed in deity worship. There will be the guru very absorbed in Sanskrit grammar and Shastra. There will be the guru very absorbed in outreach and festivals and so on. So, following the analogy of the university, there will be personal mentors, and these personal mentors will be different by department, by subject, by gender. So according to the needs of the disciple/students, there will be a mentor, there will be a tutor, there will be a teacher. Now, this offers the widest network of support for the students, the disciples. Every devotee in ISKCON can have so much inspiration from so many spiritual guides. And this Viplavah symposium is an example of that. We are here to hear from so many devotees from all over the world. Now, the system also allows for quality control, because if there is something wrong in the behavior of a teacher, the university will step in. So similarly, if there is a deviation in teachings or in behavior, the institution of ISKCON can step in. So thousands of students, even of different subjects, take advantage of the presence and the teachings of a number of professors of the spiritual science. In a university, every student can become a professor through standard training and certification. It's not a seminal thing that because your father is a guru, you become a guru. There are laws in the country, laws in the university itself. There are rules, there are exams. So, but everyone can potentially become a teacher. Similarly, in ISKCON, ideally, every disciple can and should prepare to become a preceptor. And this is a big bit of a graphic summary. Let's say, starting from the bottom, those are new devotees, people who come to Krishna consciousness. Within the trapezoid figure, those are all initiated devotees. You see a different level of seniority, different levels of experience. Imagine this moving up. And let's say the first row within the trapezoid is it's initiated devotees. And then the second line are second initiated devotees. And the third lines are the second initiated devotees who have experience giving shelter, counsel, shiksha. At one point, there is an appointment to give actual initiation to the people they're cultivating, they're guiding. And within the category of gurus, of course, there are different levels of experience. There are the gurus who are initiating devotees since more than 40 years. And there are the gurus who are initiating devotees since maybe 6 months. So the person continues. It's an ongoing process of purification. It's an ongoing process of learning how to do the service. And of course, this is under Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya. That position is taken. Nobody can become the founder Acharya, but he has created the system. So there was a GBC resolution passed last month, presently under Sabha review. It should be a formality, but let's see what the Sabha comes up with. I do not have the time to go through all the whereases. You will get this PowerPoint, and so you can study in detail if you like. So there are the whereases, the reasons why this resolution was necessary. Let's see the resolution itself. It is hereby resolved that the governing body commission of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness accepts and supports the following principles for preparing devotees to act in the role of gurus. All devotees, especially after taking sacred initiation, are encouraged to undergo systematic training to become qualified to act as spiritual preceptors. The program shall include, we don't have time to go to the details, but basically there are 4 areas: Shastric knowledge, personal development, dealing with one's own challenges and purification, dealing with disciples, aspiring disciples, and 4th, dealing in a multi-guru system, dealing harmoniously within the organization of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So, to facilitate participation and completion, the training program should be self-paced and include a blend of online and in-person training. Some people will take 5 years, some people will take 10 years, some people will take 15 or 20 years, self-paced. And of course, there will have to be a lot of online training, presentations, and examination, but there must be also some in-person mentorship. The Guru Services Committee, the GBC College for Leadership Development, and the ISKCON Board of Examinations shall collaborate in drafting and defining the curriculum, which shall be submitted to the GBC for approval before implementation. The curriculum shall include ongoing training and support for those serving as Shiksha and Diksha gurus. Now, these 3 entities are the first one who committed to this project, but of course, we welcome any qualified input from other ministries, what to speak of the Ministry of Education, and any other serious devotee who wants to participate in this. After an interim period, whose length and parameters shall be defined separately, such a training program shall become a mandatory prerequisite for commencing the service of an initiating spiritual master. In other words, this curriculum has to be developed. Of course, a lot will be using things which are courses and training which are already existing, but the curriculum has to be developed, has to be approved by the GBC. And this proposal includes that there will be an interim period before this course is ready, in which devotees who may be ready right now to become gurus, there will be certain prerequisites to start initiating. So this is the basic overview. Hare Krishna, thank you. And for more info, especially in the future, this is the email of the secretary of the GBC College, Lalita Manjari Devi, who has kindly agreed to coordinate communication. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. So the first question is, I'm feeling incompetent. Where and how do I submit for training as a guide?
Okay, just to clarify, this particular training is not available right now, but there's so much training available, just like this symposium. And just like Srila Prabhupada was saying, we are training all devotees to become spiritual masters. Every Bhagavatam class, every time you study the books, every time you chant your japa, every time you listen from seniors or peers, you're preparing to become a spiritual guide. So formally or informally, the whole ISKCON is meant to teach us to give shelter and instructions to others and to purify ourselves.
Thank you. Next question. What are your views on this idea, which is talked about many a times in the scriptures, for this yet another model of appointment of gurus, which is a self-effulgent guru? How does that fit into your models of gurus?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't know which Shastra you are talking about or which Sanskrit words would translate with self-effulgent guru. Somebody may be self-effulgent or effulgent for somebody, and somebody else may not see that effulgence. Just like many people didn't see the effulgence of Srila Prabhupada, many people didn't see the effulgence of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So I frankly doubt that's a Shastric concept at all.
Right. So the other way this question could be phrased is non-institutionalized spiritual masters.
Frankly, I don't know what institutionalized spiritual master means. Gaudiya Vaishnavism has always been, in one sense, institutionalized, at least from the time of the Goswamis. We know the story of Shyamananda Pandit. There was a big uproar in Bengal when people thought that Jiva Goswami had reinitiated him. And so dozens of Mahants, dozens of spiritual leaders traveled to Vrindavan at that time to just solve the situation. So the spirit of Gaudiya Vaishnava, the spirit of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is to do things together and to intervene when there is a deviation within the family. So Gaudiya Vaishnavism is synonymous with institutionalized management of the message and of the transmission of the message.
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada certainly created this International Society for Krishna Consciousness under a governing body commission. He established, for instance, that the GBC should establish the standards for becoming sannyasis, the standards for becoming Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. And certainly it's part of the duty of the GBC to establish standards to become a spiritual master. There is a very important concept that we need to be very clear about. In civilized societies, when your job can hurt others, then the state, the government makes sure that you are qualified. Say you are a doctor, say you are a dentist, say you are even an accountant, say you are a lawyer. Your mistakes can cost enormously to your clients. They can go to jail. If they are a lawyer and you don't do properly your work, you can kill a patient if you're not a proper doctor. So a civilized society establishes norms so that you can be qualified to give shelter to others. And it's a process, it's a gradual process. For instance, to give an example, in the United States of America, it only became obligatory to go to a medicine course before becoming a doctor only around the 1870s. So up to the 1870s, so basically under 50 years ago, anybody could perform surgery without any type of certification, without any type of official training. So in ISKCON, we are relatively a young movement. We have been producing spiritual masters, and some of them have been doing marvelously. At the same time, we want to have a certification, we want to have preparation, and as the resolution pointed out, we want to have ongoing training. We don't subscribe to the idea that the day you start doing this service as a guru, now you reach the Turiya, you reach the fourth dimension, and now you're beyond the beyond, and you cannot learn anymore. That's a very artificial idea. So training before becoming a guru, even formal Diksha guru, and training, ongoing training after you become a guru.
Thank you. Very, very important initiative, very important topic. Very glad to hear from you what is being undertaken now. The devotees here are encouraged to participate in this. If you feel inspired, please connect with Kante Prabhu and the secretary of the GBC College if you like to participate in this effort. There is another question from Krishnendu Prabhu, which I request you can take offline with Krishnendu Prabhu, maybe send a chat. His question is it up to the GBC to authorize, in brackets, open rubber stamp brackets closed, who can be a guru? Can't the aspiring disciples decide for themselves who to get initiated by? So I request you to have that discussion on the chat or in our post-symposium networking session. So I am going to, in a few minutes, before you all leave, I'm going to post a link. If you're interested to get together in an informal way after this symposium, please click on that link and then you can join us there for a little informal discussion on topics that you like, or if you like to ask anything about the Ministry of Education, it's also like an open forum that you can ask me questions with respect to that. One point of clarification, Kante Prabhu, the ISKCON Board of Examinations is a part of the Ministry of Education. It is clearly a part of the Ministry of Education. So to that degree, the Ministry of Education is involved in this effort a little bit. We'll be glad to get more involved in whatever capacity. As you know, the ministries in ISKCON are not staffed with hundreds of devotees. It's mostly thin. But if there is any which way we can assist in this effort, like through the symposium or through our marketing channels to reach out to the educators, it will be our pleasure.
You're most welcome, and thank you for your offer.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Kante Prabhu. And I'm now going to request everybody, if your time permits, please join us this evening. We are going to have the final session this evening, which is going to focus on yet another very, very important topic. We have this evening, by the way, 2 speakers who are going to join us, actually 4 speakers, and amongst them is His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu, His Grace Shesha Prabhu, Mukunda Ananda Prabhu, and I too will make a presentation. We are going to focus on a very, very important aspect of engaging regularly in reading, absorbing Srila Prabhupada's books, which lays a foundation for everything else in our lives. So with that note, I am posting in this chat for everyone that if you like to participate in this post-symposium get-together, you can please click on the link. Remember, the moment you click the link, you will leave this meeting and you'll be prompted to join the post-symposium breakout session or a get-together. So if you feel like that and you have time, please join us. I can also take any questions you may have there. Thank you all for joining. Please come back with full enthusiasm at 5:30 p.m. India time today for our last session. Invite your friends also. And if you have any difficulty in joining, you can always write to us and we'll provide you the credentials. It's been a pleasure to have you all here. I will join that meeting in just a few minutes after we close here. So I offer my obeisances to everybody who participated. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Thank you for joining. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.